I feel like I've thrown this around a lot, but Portopia Renzoku Satsujin Jiken was a game that changed everything. The title is usually rendered in English as the Portopia serial murder case, even though there's really only one murder in the game. Portopia was originally a text adventure on the PC-88 platform, and it was a solid success there, so naturally they decided to bring it to the Famicom. And it's the Famicom version that really took off. Over 600,000 copies sold. It defined a genre, changed people's perception of what Famicom games could be, and launched the career of one of Japan's most important game developers. This was the first game by Yuji Horii, and if you don't know him, then I'm honestly surprised that you stumbled onto videos all about Famicom games. Don't worry though, we'll be getting to his more famous creation pretty quickly. In terms of changing perspective on Famicom games, you might have noticed that this is the first Famicom game that's kind of text-heavy. Without turning this into a 15-minute long lecture on Japanese writing, there's a lot of complications that make text-heavy Famicom games difficult. There's no built-in support for displaying the text or for character sets. Because the ROMs were so expensive to manufacture in 1985, Chunsoft couldn't even put in a full character set. So they fit in what they could, and rewrote pieces of the game to get around that limitation. The result is the first Famicom game that is actually telling a proper story. I won't say that it's being told well, or that it's an especially good mystery, but it's a complete story told in the game, with a plot that's actually a little bit complex. And as for genre defining, Portopia set the standard for what Japanese adventure games would be, and Chunsoft would be the definitive maker of those adventure games. We're going to see a lot of Famicom murder mystery games, and there's plenty of other adventure games too. In a few years' time, adventure games are going to be one of the major genres on the system. Eventually, Chunsoft would streamline their adventure game system, and from that we get visual novels. And this is where all of that began. I'd say Portopia is Japan's King's Quest. And just as that implies, even though it's first, it doesn't mean it's really worth going back to. Okay, I'm 3 minutes into this video and I haven't even started talking about playing the game yet. That's because as an adventure game, there isn't a whole lot to get into on how it plays. The story goes, Yamakawa Kozo, shady businessman and all-around ne'er-do-well, has been found murdered in his home. It's up to you as a police detective and your assistant Yasu to find out who done it. Yamakawa had a lot of enemies. The story takes place in Kobe. Portopia, for what it's worth, is the nickname of a large artificial island off the coast of Kobe. The 1981 World's Fair was held there. The Ferris wheel from that is actually in the background of some of the images. The menu of options you can take is actually 2 pages long, and you flip between those by pressing the B button. Unfortunately, this game sets up what's going to be the worst aspect of these adventure games. They're not about thought or solving a complex puzzle. You just brute force all of the options until the game lets you continue. As the story progresses, you'll pull in suspects, beat confessions out of them for other crimes. That wasn't a joke, by the way. And eventually work out who the real killer is. Personally, I worked it out immediately. I won't spoil it for anybody, but as someone who's read plenty of mysteries, I recognized what was happening instantly, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you want to try the game yourself and don't speak Japanese, there is a fan translation out there. I will give you this hint up front. In the 80s, dialing *15 on a Japanese phone dialed the last person to call that phone. There is some unexpected content for a game on a system that was primarily targeted at children. This teenage girl was sold to Yamakawa to pay off someone's debts. And there's multiple suicides as well. There's also a drug dealer in the game. though that's the kind of crime we'll be seeing a lot of in action games going forward. Portopia casts a long shadow, but there's one direct follow-up that we're going to see on the Famicom. It's not a proper sequel, but it's by the same writer and the same structure. I think we can call it a follow-up. As for this game, Portopia Renzoku Satsujin Jiken is not a good mystery story. It feels like you're one step removed from a lot of things, because you wind up just telling Yasu to go and investigate something or question somebody. You can poke around areas yourself, but there's very little interaction. The parts where you have to point out a spot on the screen are rare enough that I'd rather they just have you select menu options for them. And in the end, the mystery is pretty unsatisfying. I have to mention one more thing before I wrap up. The conclusion of the game features a big maze that you have to explore, and to get the clue that brings everything together, you have to locate this nondescript wall, run into it and identify that it makes the wrong noise, then run into it again to have Yasu note that there's something there, then run into it 2 more times, and then you finally enter the secret room. It is an absolutely terrible bit of design. Portopia is a perfect example of how historically important doesn't mean good.